Technology in the Classroom by Amy, Haley, and Kelly. This is our Issues and Trends group project. The first part of this PowerPoint will talk about the history of technology in the classroom. In 1650, the first piece of real technology entered the classroom, which was known as the Hornbook. The Hornbook were wooden paddles used to help the children learn the alphabet and verses. You can see a small picture of this on the left side of the slide. Another piece of technology really didn't enter the classroom until 200 years later, and this piece of technology was known as the magic lantern. This was the first real projector that was used inside of a classroom. These were glass frames that were projected onto the walls. They would turn the lights off and project these glass frames onto the wall. These were used at the end of World War I. Around 8,000 lantern slides were being used in the Chicago public school system at that time. And then about 20 years later, in 1890, slate and chalkboards entered the classroom. Shortly after slates and chalkboards entered the classroom, the film projector entered the classroom. The film projector was difficult to set up and the usage was limited. But then in 1930, the overhead projector entered the classroom. The overhead projector was originally used with the police, but once it entered into the classroom, it created an interactive classroom at a minimal cost. It's kind of crazy to see the difference and how we still use overhead projectors, but how they originally entered the classroom and at what time they originally entered the classroom. And what was a little shocking for me was the ballpoint pen entered the classroom in 1940. So actually an overhead projector was created before the ballpoint pen. And a fun fact is the ballpoint pen would originally cost $9.75 each. In 1940, the mimeograph helped teachers to give homework to the entire class, which is the silver machine that you see in the middle of the slide. That was the mimeograph. And it's kind of like a modern day printer, except that teachers would get ink all over themselves trying to create enough copies for their whole entire class. And then in 1950, headphones entered the school system. And also in 1950, the slide rule, which you see on the bottom right, was a popular tool for schools. And then in 1958, the television entered the classroom, which allowed the teachers to show films in the class. In 1970, the handheld calculator entered the field of education, which actually took the place of the slide ruler that I just showed you on the last slide. This helped with quick calculations. In 1972, the Scantron saved teachers hours and hours of time and helped them to grade papers quickly. And then in 1980, the personal computer entered education for the very first time. I feel like the 1980s were a huge turning point for technology in the classrooms. I think that computers opened up a door for technology in the classrooms. And you can see a 1980s computer in the top left corner. In the late 1900s, in 1999, a huge upgrade from the whiteboard and the chalkboards entered the classroom, and these were interactive whiteboards. A lot of us probably grew up with some of these whiteboards. I remember that teachers started to get these whiteboards at my high school, and they did not know how to use them. But now, pretty much every school that I can think of in my county uses these interactive whiteboards. I use it daily. I absolutely love it. So in 1999, the interactive whiteboards entered the classroom, and then about 11 years later is when the iPads entered the classroom. And I think that this was also a big step for education. I think that this allows students to use these iPads in order to help their learning. It gives them something, it motivates them. I think that this is huge for technology in the classroom. And now Haley is going to talk to you about current technology in the classroom.
After looking at the history of technology and the introduction of various tools that were once used, we are now going to look at the current state of technology in today's classrooms. So when thinking about one of the biggest debates currently, many ask how much is too much technology? So this is a question that myself as well as all other pre-K through 12th grade teachers should essentially ask themselves and consider when planning daily learning activities. While researching online, I also found a very interesting article entry, and basically this journal discusses how much of this debate actually comes from the generational gap of teachers and students. So if you actually think about it, many of the teachers who are still teaching today actually grew up in a time where technology was either non-existent or it was sparse, or maybe some grew up in an era where computers were just now being introduced. And actually, this journal goes on to consider or call teachers today digital immigrants, which I thought was very interesting. And they also talk about how 21st century learners are considered digital natives. So basically, when thinking about this current gap in technology, I think it's important for us to really consider better teaching or training programs so that all teachers feel confident when incorporating technology into their classrooms. So within the same journal that was previously mentioned, a generational study was actually collected, and surveys were given out to 17 teachers, and 13 of them returned them. The teachers themselves ranged from 1 year to 37 years of experience. And basically, if you look at both of the charts, the data shows that 42% of teachers felt students learned better when using technological methods. 89% of teachers reported that technology tools were actually more effective for their students, especially when demonstrating their understanding. And also, when it comes to independent use, it was actually surprising to find that although there were such high percentages with students learning through technology and also displaying their understanding, 89% actually reported that technology seemed to be a little bit distracting to their students. I also want to point out that this is only one study, but just based on this data and the trend of technology currently, I think it's really important for us to think about how helpful technology can be to students, but we also must keep in mind that this is an issue that's going to continue, and it's going to be a debate on whether teachers want to incorporate technology or the amount of technology they want to incorporate in their classroom, as well as we must consider the knowledge that teachers must gain or must grow in order to keep up with our technological society. Now, we are going to look at the different types of technology found in classrooms today. So, as Kelly had mentioned, computers were actually introduced in the educational field in 1980. And from there, they've really only grown in popularity. And now the invention of things like mini laptops, Chromebooks, have actually taken over and can be found in a majority of classrooms today for student use. You'll also find document cameras and projectors in classrooms. You will find individual iPads for students to use. You will also see, of course, the interactive smartboard, as Kelly had mentioned earlier. But the interactive smartboard has actually made many advancements over the past few years, and they are a tool that students can actually use to engage more in the learning process. So they can essentially come up to the board They can select answers, they can circle words, they can pick numbers for math, they can write words. So basically just the technology of the smartboard actually really increases student motivation, and it gives them the opportunity to come up and feel important in the learning process. There's also online websites now. So Accelerated Reader, for example, when our student taught in kindergarten last year, the students would actually log in either in the classroom or they could log in at home, and they would gain points each week based on the level of book they would read. And as the points progressed, they were able to move on to the next level of reading, which I thought was very, very interesting and very engaging for the students. In classrooms today, you'll also maybe see some live webcam feeds. So basically, teachers will take their students on a virtual tour if maybe funding of the school does not provide a trip somewhere. So you can actually click on this link, and it'll show a live webcam feed of penguins in Monterey Bay Aquarium. Last year, when I completed my EdTPA, we did something very similar, but when we were completing a unit on American symbols, I actually allowed the students to go on a virtual tour to the Statue of Liberty, and they absolutely loved this experience. Other current technology used in classrooms today include a variety of educational apps. So you'll see the list below. Now, these don't include all the apps, but there are some that I feel are very helpful in the classroom and that I've personally used. So these apps can actually be used either to teach new skills or reinforce previously learned information. So, for example, Starfall and ABC Mouse actually provide a game-like element where both the teacher and students can actually click on various picture icons, and those icons will lead them to learn about things such as numbers, shapes, colors, addition, subtraction, cardinality, rhymes, and reading. If you look down, or if you look after that, you'll see Prodigy Math as well. Now, this was actually another useful app that I used while teaching in a third grade math classroom. So basically, with this app, the students actually got to create characters, and they lived on a virtual island where they could interact with their classmates by casting spells and unlocking treasures. But in order to do so, they actually had to correctly answer pre-designed math questions. So this was a very, very engaging app for the students in the class. So if you have time and you are interested, you can look at the apps or the icons below, the picture icons, and you can actually click on those and they will take you to the main page of those apps. I also want to talk a little bit about assistive technology and how technology today is actually helping students with disabilities be successful in classrooms. So the first technological tool that I want to talk about is hearing aids, or the hearing loop system. So basically, if you look at the picture to the left, you will see a system, or it's a receiver box actually, and the teacher will wear the receiver box, and the students will wear a wire with a headphone in their ear, and basically as the teacher talks, a signal is transmitted to the child's earpiece, and they will be able to, and it will actually amplify the sound. So for those students that have hearing impairments, for example, it will just help them in the learning process to better understand what's happening in the classroom. There's also a variety of apps and speaking devices. There are computer-driven wheelchairs, and if you look at the bottom picture, there's also digital picture boards, which help students communicate. To conclude this section on the current trend of technology, I wanted to leave you all with a few quotes and statistics that I found to be very interesting. The first quote states that technology has the power to influence curriculum, instructional modes, and the way in which teachers essentially communicate with families and community members. The second quote states, teacher training in the United States is one of the most cited reasons for lack of technology implementation in classrooms. So with this quote, I really think we should consider the future of technology and the way in which we are teaching future teachers about technology and how to effectively use it in classrooms. The third quote says, a study completed in 2015 showed that 63% of teachers use tablets, 58% of principals have implemented technology in classrooms, and 51% of parents want their children in a blended learning environment. So basically, by a blended learning environment, this means that parents want their children in a classroom that provides both a balance of traditional classroom techniques as well as new technological methods of teaching and learning. When it comes to implications, I really want to stress that the appropriate use of technology is key. Technology is a very helpful resource, but it should not be used as a sole teaching mechanism. Rather, it should be integrated appropriately into the learning process, such as the apps and the various technological devices you've seen in the previous slides. Lastly, it's very important for the field of education to continue classes, workshops, and trainings to ensure the proper use of technology. And from there, teachers can use the information they learn about technology to teach future generations of students. Now, Amy is going to talk to you a little bit about future predictions of technology use.
I'm going to talk about predictions of technology in future classrooms. So here are some of the predictions we have for classroom technology in the next 10 years. So the first one is technology will continue to evolve in the classroom. And better tech will be available for students and teachers, which will change the learning process. I'm going to talk about some of the types of technology we think will be available in classrooms in the next 10 years. But basically, we've seen over time that technology just continues to get better, and that makes it more accessible to students and teachers to use in the classroom. And it just changes the learning process when these new types of technology are added. So our next prediction is that more and more technology will be incorporated in education. This is another thing that we've seen historically, that as more things are invented, more and more technology just becomes incorporated. So like we started off with, a wooden board and continued to move on and on from there. And now today there's laptops and tablets and interactive whiteboards in the classroom. So who knows what kinds of technology will be available for classrooms. But as our society continues to become more and more ingrained with technology, it is critical that it is incorporated in our classroom so that we can prepare students for that rapidly evolving technological world. And then our third prediction is that digital natives will become the majority of teachers in the classroom. So Haley talked about digital natives and digital immigrants. Digital immigrants are the teachers who weren't raised with these types of technology. It wasn't incorporated in all of their lives. But as those teachers start to age and they retire, they're going to be replaced with digital natives who've been around this type of technology for their entire life. So this will lead to the use of more tech in the classroom and more effective technological instruction because they've been around this technology their entire life and they know how to use it. They know how to show people to use it. And I also know that teachers now are getting classes in technology in college so that they know what types of technology to use, how to use it effectively and appropriately, like Haley was discussing. And I think that that's just going to continue. So future technology that we think is going to be seen in the classroom 10 years from now. And there's augmented and virtual reality. So children will be able to fully immerse themselves in experiences such as virtual field trips. This is especially true for virtual reality. They'll be able to put on the headsets and look in front of them and be, on the moon. This is going to allow children to learn in just a completely different way. The two photos on the side, there's the children wearing augmented reality, and there's also an example of virtual reality with the dinosaur, where they can look through the screen and see the dinosaur in front of them. So these are types of technology that are currently used, but they aren't as effective as they could be. They're still evolving and changing, and they're putting the finishing touches basically on augmented and virtual reality. So it's just going to keep getting better and better. This is also something that's not really seen in that many classrooms yet. We think that in the future, this is going to be just like an ingrained part of education. Also, 3D printing. I think we know what 3D printing is at this point, but it's not readily available to people or the public. So in the future, we think that 3D printing will be in all classrooms. This allows children to design and engineer ideas that they have and bring them to reality. So the bottom picture on the screen is a 3D printer, and somebody designed that on an app. So children could create games in their classroom. They could create materials that they could use for show and tell, and this is having them engineer it themselves, design it, bring it to life, which I think would just be incredible to be able to do in the classroom. Who knows what children would be able to come up with. It would be fascinating. The cloud. So in the future, we think that classrooms are probably going to end up going paperless. So all children would have tablets. If there's not even a better type of technology by then, they could use tablets to collaborate with each other. They could collaborate with the teacher. They could use the apps and the software to work on a project together, and they all could share and collaborate and work on that idea together. Teachers could look at it and provide feedback to it. This would also allow teachers and families to collaborate together in a completely different way, because they're being able to have updates on their children. They're seeing their work. They're seeing the projects that they're doing on their tablets. Children are also not having to carry books around to the classroom. They can use textbooks on their tablets and access those. And then robotics. Robotics is an interesting idea for the future. We could see children learning how to code with the robots. Coding is a really huge thing now. It's a skill that many people need to have because lots of jobs are focused around coding. Lots of jobs are focused around technology. So using robots as a way to teach children how to code would be interesting. We also discussed the idea of maybe robotic assistants in the classroom. We're starting to use a lot of assistive robots in our everyday life, so how long before those become parts of the classroom? Maybe to help read stories or to help teach lessons. Who knows what kind of technology there might be in a classroom. I know we talked some about how there's robots actually starting to be in classrooms now, so 10 years from now, it's hard to imagine just the advancements that there's going to be in the technology and what is going to be available for students to learn with. So just kind of in summary, we talked about the history of technology, kind of where we started off and where technology is now. We talked some about how a problem we're facing right now is how much technology is too much, and how teachers need to be sure that they're teaching and using technology in an appropriate way. Because when technology is used, it's just a fantastic tool for teachers and for students. And our world is just becoming so technological anyway. We have got to teach children how to use technology effectively, because that's where a majority of the jobs are going to be coming from whenever they enter the workforce. So using technology in the classroom is a great way to prepare them for that technological world. We also discussed predictions we think we will have for future technology in the classroom in the next 10 years or so. It really is hard to predict what it will look like because technology advances so quickly, and it's hard to tell with how quickly things evolve in our world now, but it will certainly be interesting to see what will be available for students to use and how that their learning is going to change. I think it's going to be fascinating. So thank you guys so much for listening to our presentation, and if you have any questions, please let us know. That would be great. Thank you so much. The last 2 slides are reference pages.